let me just say, and now that we're starting, and we'll just roll right into it, but I don't have a great introduction for you because I think your resume kind of speaks for itself. All people really need to do is Google your name, which is
David Allen Tracy.
David Allen Tracy is a new acquisition in our BNI Cumulus group, and I thank you so much for coming on board. You've been just in what have you been in for a month now?
A month, yeah.
You've been a huge acquisition and a huge help, and David is a personal brand coach, so David understands the intricacies of digging your individuality out of you. So he's also kind of new to the St. Cloud area, right? You're not living here.
I don't live in St. Cloud, but I now come once or twice a week. So
yes. So you're getting very well acquainted with it. So David's also hosted his own podcast. He's been on plenty of podcasts. I think you spoke about that in the BNI room this week, was how this gets out there very quickly. So I'm very thankful that you were willing to come on and talk with me.
100%.
Plus, we haven't really had a one-to-one yet. So this kind of falls in that range. So let me start off real quick. If I'm going to be leaning into the computer, it's because I didn't want to, my notes and questions were originally on the phone. So
we're good. We're good.
So I'm going to start off with a quote I heard recently, which was, "We make poor decisions trying to get other people to accept us instead of accepting ourselves and then finding the right people." So where did the journey start for you on the road to self-discovery and personal branding?
So I think for most people it starts at a young age, but you don't realize it, obviously. I think when it comes to individuality, it's the blend of many components. It's our heritage, it's our upbringing, our location, it's our parents, it's our worldview, the religious background we come from, the experiences we have, the friends we had, the traumas we've experienced, all of that shapes that, but there's oftentimes not a real awareness of it until we're a little bit older. It does begin to have a level of awareness during our teen years, and then it progresses towards college. I think college is a big time for people to start stepping into greater awareness because suddenly they're not with mom and dad anymore. They're on their own. They're in school, university rather. But even then, I find that they don't quite, because there's still this collective perspective on individuality based on peers. It really, for a lot of people, I think it hits when they start to hit 30. Oftentimes they're already married. In some cases, they have kids, and they start to go, what do I want to build my life up for? I've been doing everything according to what everybody else wanted me to be and do, but who am I really, and what do I want the rest of my life to look like in the future? So in many respects, for me, that was a lot of what it was as well. I was born in Wisconsin, but grew up in Panama, in Central America, amongst indigenous tribes. So that is a huge component of my personality, and that although I am Caucasian, Midwestern parents, culturally, I'm got a little bit of Midwest in me, but I'm also extremely Latino in my perspective. I'm not Latino, and I'm not Latino culturally. I'm a blend of many components.
Sure.
But I also grew up amongst volunteers from all around the world who came down to do nonprofit work because my parents ran a nonprofit. And so as a result of that, I had friends from Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East, from all over the place. Of course, the indigenous kids as well that I grew up amongst. And so from a very young age, I had this very global, multicultural perspective and point of view. However, in most cases, we're always looking for the individuality, and we don't know quite how to get it. For me, although I didn't have a political bent one way or the other, I wasn't like, oh, I'm an American or I'm Panamanian, because I wasn't Panamanian and I didn't grow up in the States. My identity really came down to a lot at the time, my nonprofit involvement. So I didn't know who I was outside of the realm of giving back, of community-oriented humanitarian work or social type activities. And when that was taken away from me when I was 30 and had cancer, and I had to take a break from all of that, I went through a little bit of a internal crisis of who am I without giving back all the time? Who am I without the cause? And that really was hard for me to balance and figure out. At this point, I already had 4 kids, and I was thinking strongly about going into business, but I didn't know who I would be in the realm of business because everything I always did was philanthropic or giving back. And so I went through a lot of deep kind of introspection to try to figure out who I was, discover it more deeply. Who am I outside of the realm of of the structures in my environment. And I began to realize that I am an eclectic individual who is always going to look at things from various multicultural lenses.
Sure.
I'm always going to be highly inclusive. I'm going to be highly expressive as an individual. But I couldn't allow myself to do all of that and to be freely who I am until I had overcome some trauma.
Sure. I think that's a big part of most of us.
Right.
And I think it's the suppression of it, as you don't know it's there, right? I've talked with plenty of people about this because I've gone through an own self journey with that. I think it comes down to, because you've gone through it, so it's easier to talk to people that's gone through it. Is like, for me personally, there's a deep fear of vulnerability. That's why the social mask is on the outskirts analyzing. You know what I mean? I'm constantly looking at which pack do I fit into, who am I not going to gel with, things like that. So for you, there was a couple things you had mentioned, which was your identity was very altruistic. And I think a lot of people that are very giving, not that it's ever a bad thing to be giving, but they definitely do that with intent to heal something that's missing from them. That's something they didn't get growing up, or it's something within that realm. Not always, and I would be wary of those people who don't really openly admit that, but I think it comes from a place like that. What has been your history like? Have you been through therapy and things like that? Is that something that helps you connect with those you sit down with?
So I think for most of my life, I had suppressed my trauma, as most people do, because there is a level of, if I admit that it's there, then what do I do with that? And there was really no clear outlet for me to do that. I tried different ways to do so. I mean, everybody goes through trauma, different types, and I've been very open on my podcast that I had some sexual abuse growing up, so that was very heavy, that I carried in my being for many, many, many years, until finally I opened up about it when I was 19. And that wasn't enough just to admit that things had happened. It was beyond that. I had to figure out, how do I then release this? How do I cope with this? Not just cope, but not have it be part of my reality.
Right.
I tried a lot of different things with a lot of different types of people, different modalities. I would say that they all were somewhat helpful, but it wasn't until I went and had some theta healing sessions that it really kind of shifted the way I view trauma. I had a client, and this was not that long ago, we're talking 4 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, if not even less than that actually. But reality is, she was a client of mine. I was doing marketing for her. Start hearing her talk with the way she talks about mindset stuff and the theta brainwave, and I'm like, what is this? I'm intrigued. My wheels are turning. I've not heard this before, so I want to understand what it is. And got going into it. Next thing you know, she's sitting down with me doing theta healing sessions with me, and I'm starting to go back and trace through all kinds of stuff that I had buried. And I think that with most trauma, that's what we do. We suppress it, we bury it, because if it's at the surface level, it's going to bleed. And then it's going to be messy, and it's going to hurt other people, or it's going to hurt us. We don't know what to do with it. We're afraid of that process. So what I found with theta healing was essentially using the theta brainwave as a route to reorient the way your mind and emotions process grief and trauma. So we all have brainwaves. Your brainwaves are going right now. We have alpha, beta, theta, gamma, all of those. But theta brainwave states is the state of mind that we're in as we're falling asleep. We're aware that we're falling asleep, yet we can drift into the dream world in the imagination world pretty quickly. Subconsciously, while also being aware of reality around us. This can happen during a long road trip when you're driving and you kind of zone out. It can happen when you're looking at the ocean and the beach, or a mountainscape, whatever it is. Even watching TV, you can sometimes zone out, and subconsciously your brain is doing a bunch of different things. So oftentimes our conscious mind is what's pushing this, driving the steering wheel and pushing things forward. And we can talk ourselves consciously out of any situation and make excuses for it, or if anyone harmed us, we can give reasons why they must have did it for this reason, but that's not the reality of the grief that we're facing. Theta healing goes, what do you really want? And what are you really feeling from the subconscious level, the stuff that's in the background that you'll never allow to come to the surface? Let's bring that stuff to the surface. So there's oftentimes strong emotion and imagery that comes in place. that when that allowance is there, and it takes some time for people to get there, but when they get there, it's really quick to get down to the root cause issues. And the way I've often described it, and the way she described it to me, was that trauma is, as our life is this, as if it's a pattern or a tapestry, but trauma is like a thread that gets woven into it. We get so used to that trauma being part of that pattern that it's hard for us to imagine what it would be like to not have it, because it's so integrated and woven in that it feels safe to have it.
Right, right.
But when we remove it, we think we're going to unravel, that everything's going to be lost. Now, who am I without this trauma? Because trauma has now formed as part of my identity. And so what happens, though, is that we go to the source where the thread was first woven in. Usually there's a subconscious belief that we adopted, some sort of a counterfeit reality that we adopted about ourselves, rather than a perspective that is true. And if that can be altered, then that thread can be removed, and rather than disrupting the pattern, it actually reveals what the pattern was supposed to be from the beginning, without that in there. And it allows us then to be authentically who we were meant to be, without it there. And so I eventually became certified in that myself, because it gave me such breakthrough that I'm like, I want to get certified in this. And lo and behold, as a personal brand coach, I integrated into my work with my clients, and most 90% plus of my clients opt to do at least 2 to 3 sessions with me in Theta Healing, because it helps them discover who they really are without the trauma, thereby having a stronger personal brand.
Yeah, and I think that that's awesome that you did that, because I'm also personally like trying to take, great artists steal, right? So you take from everywhere you've learned and you integrate it and make it your own. So I love that you kind of integrated that completely into your person and into your business, and you're like, let me give this back to you. You know, taking from someone, because I struggle with a little bit of like, you know, I've been taken advantage of a lot, you know, especially when I'm in good states of mind and good financial positionings and things like that. So I don't ever want someone to feel like I'm taking advantage of them, because I know how that feels. So like when someone offers me something, I always push back first. And I'm like, I don't want to take this, and if I do, I better give it back to someone else, because I don't want to just feel like, oh, well, sure, just give me. You know what I mean? Because I'm a very, on the inside, I don't like to show this a lot, but I'm a very giving person. I'm quite a softie, you know. So it's,
you're a coconut.
Yeah, exactly.
Hard on the outside, soft on the inside.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I agree with that. It's very telling, and I do the same thing, right? That's why I love coaching, and I always say you need to have a mentor and be a mentor, because then you're constantly getting advice, and then you're constantly teaching it, and that's just learning twice.
Yes.
So I think when it comes to learning, that's crucial for anybody, is always be absorbing and then pushing it back onto whoever actually needs it. Because once you don't need it anymore, you might always need it, but someone will need it more than you.
Almost every great coach or person who's giving out advice has someone who's feeding into them elsewhere. We should never stop growing, or always evolving, always growing to improve ourselves. And I think that anytime we don't, it goes both ways. If we're not receiving, we're not getting fresh perspective. If we're not giving, we're stagnating. Right. And so there's no flow.
So getting more into a little bit more of personal branding and things like that, they say a lot of what I do in real estate business is relationship. You know, they're like, well, this business is relationship based, things like that. I always kind of counter that and say life is a relationship business. I've always said that. So with that, at the core of what you do is building relationships. So how much trial and error did it take for you to learn key components of building healthy and thriving relationships?
No, that's a really good question. Of course, I think my whole life, and as with everybody, it's all about relationships, and you build them by osmosis. However, there's an intentional effort in personal branding to try and present the right facet of yourself to the right demographic. That we all have numerous facets of our personality. All of my businesses that I've owned over the years showcased different elements of my personality. No one ever is going to get the full gamut of who I am, because there's different relationships with different domains. But when it comes to personal branding, it's all about what facet of my personality will resonate the best with my desired target market. Now, the thing with relationship building, and as it pertains to personal branding, is authenticity is so key. People have a lot of mistrust when they feel that someone isn't authentic. So if we're projecting an image of ourselves that isn't authentic, or we don't know who we are, that's going to create insecurity. Or if we're being a chameleon and pretending to be something that we're not, or trying to project an image of whatever, people can read through that BS and understand right away what is true and what's not. It's an unspoken reality that exists there. And so what is really key is people being really comfortable with themselves, thereby being comfortable with the relationships with those around them. The insecurity that we harbor within our hearts then manifest in creating insecurity even energetically with those in our circle, where they don't know quite where to put us, and it makes them uneasy. So one thing I tell...
frequency, sorry to interrupt you, that frequency really stands out. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It is a frequency. And so I oftentimes tell people we need to go introspective before we can go outward, go inward then outward, because, for example, if I'm not knowing who I am, then how do I know how to relate with others?
Yes, it's a very good point.
Yeah. It's really, really important. If I can't relate to myself, how can I relate to others? And so this is such a huge component for me. I couldn't understand growing up a reality where I could have a friendship that was not a friendship that wasn't going to be somewhat transactional in nature, in the sense of I needed to help them. If I wasn't helping them, then it wasn't, I didn't know what to do. If we weren't talking about how to help save the world, I didn't know quite what to do. And so, yes, I could talk about hobbies and things up to an extent, but there always had to be a purpose behind what I did. It's really hard for me to relate with people outside of that realm. And once I began to go introspective and understand, despite the fact that there were extreme amounts of gifts given to me just by my experiences growing up, that wasn't the only component of who I am and was, that who I am and what I like and desire became very clear to me. And all of a sudden I started to have friendships that I could share those things with beyond transactional nature. So that was really, really important. I think it's really important to be able to describe your vibe, is what I say. Describe your vibe. Who are you? What is your essence? What's your personality type? What makes you tick? What gets you up in the morning? What's your unique point of view? Why do you do what you do? And once you have that, then you can describe your tribe. Who are your people? That's going to be both on the friendship side of things, relationships, as well as in client base as well.
I agree with pretty much everything you said, and I'm not going to definitely argue with anything because I have a lot of the same outlook. And have you read Personality Plus?
No.
We'll get into books a little bit later, but I think you should dive into that one.
Okay.
It's a fantastic book, and it breaks people down into a lot like the disc. You know, you're going to have your four main ones, but there's obviously just a different perspective on it. And I definitely relate to people that are more my speed, just like you. But I also embrace those that are not, because I know they're always going to challenge me in some way. Even if I can't stand them, I know that reflects something more in me, that there's a reason this person makes me feel a certain way. And that's more about me than it is about them. And you mentioned, so one thing I mentioned, or you said that I love that you brought up, is authenticity. I feel that people who are more authentic see through inauthenticity much quicker. And I actually recently, a very good question I feel like you could ask people is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how authentic are you? And those that say 9 or 10 probably are not very authentic.
I think it depends. It depends, because I think one thing, the way I define it, is it depends on the facet. So, for example, how I am at home with my wife and my kids is authentic, but it's not the facet I'm bringing to the table. They get to see me at my worst and my best. But when I show up to a business meeting, I'm trying to put my best out. And the best facet that makes sense in that environment. Or when you're at a funeral, you dress black, you behave in a way that, if you don't know the person who died and don't feel actual deep emotion, you're at least respectful. So there is a facet to it but the way I look at authenticity is really the root word of that, which is the author. Do you know yourself well enough to write your story? Do you know the author well enough to know what story to write? Because people who don't know themselves will, generally speaking, allow others to write their story for them.
Yep, yep.
And so what happens when you have that root and you understand the author, you then operate in authenticity. And true authenticity allows you to operate in authority. Authority not from the standpoint of top-down, I'm a
right
label, but authority in the sense that you command authority. You walk into the room and people go, oh, this guy is, or this woman is awesome. They not awesome in the sense that they're better than anybody else, but this awesomeness of like, they are comfortable. And because they're so comfortable and confident in who they are and what they bring to the table, I feel comfortable and more confident too, and it makes people feel good. So very much a frequency thing, as you were mentioning before. The chemistry is everything when it comes to personal branding. You're a realtor, as an example. How many thousands of realtors are in the state of Florida?
Well, we both know that I've mentioned I hate when people introduce me as that, but yes.
I get that, but you're in the real estate industry.
Yeah, of course.
So you are looking to differentiate yourself for a reason from that. Why? There are a lot of people who are realtors, for example, who don't do a good job, who don't represent the industry well, who are flaky, they don't show up, they
don't represent their client well.
They don't represent their client well. So you're trying to differentiate yourself, especially because of your personality type. Being a high D and C, you literally have this need to do things with excellence, following through, providing the best that you've analyzed, you've researched, and you've also been able to effectively execute.
Right.
And so when we have that then, and you identify that in yourself, you're hoping and trying is then that people will see that, and they'll see the excellence, and you don't even, that speaks enough for itself. So that is your authentic self projecting authority.
Right.
I don't need to tell you to trust me. My trust is innately seen.
Right. And I always say that as well, is at the end of the day, and I mean this because, I mean, I didn't grow up rich. I'm still not rich. I'm still completely okay with that. It's probably due to my relationship with money in that facet that I don't have a lot of it, because I try to give as much as I can if I see people in trouble and things like that. But that's because trust means far more to me than money. My values mean far more to me than the dollar at the end of the day, which is why I have talked myself out of more sales than I've talked myself into, which is why I've denied more sales than I'd like to admit, is because I value things above money. Maybe too many things in some instances, but I can't betray myself for a dollar. I will never do that.
Well, and I think that's, again, when you mention core values, a personality is just the fruit on the tree, but the values are at the root level.
Right.
And everything stems from that level. Your value not being in monetary gain, for many people, there's usually 5 or 6 areas of values that we'll have. For some people, it's spiritual or having awareness and growing that way. For others, it's humanitarian and social. For others, it's political and power. For others, it's economic and control. For others, it's going to be more artistic expression and freedom. And there's one other one. But basically, those things dictate what route and why we make decisions.
Sure.
In my case, my desire is to have, if I'm very honest with myself, it isn't monetary gain either. Although I know that money is a means to an end, it's not the primary factor for me. My primary factor is to increase influence, and thereby through influence have more experiences. And in your case, it is, what would you say?
I think influence is a big part of it. But I think the older I get and the more I am vulnerable, especially, of course, I mentioned this earlier, you weren't there the day I had my presentation.
No, and I'm bummed.
But it was completely, 10 minutes of me being my most authentic, vulnerable self, because all I talked about was my life when I was a kid, which you don't know this. Some of the people watching don't know this yet, but they'll know it now. So I'm a 2-time transplant patient. So when I was born and my kidneys didn't work, so I was on dialysis for the first 5 years of my life. And then at 5, I had development issues, because you have development issues if you're on dialysis for the first 5 years of your life. So at 5, I got my first transplant. And then I had that for like around 23, 24 years. And then the organ started failing. And then I went back on dialysis for 2 years. And in that time, how I saved my mental state was work. So I would go work full-time at delivering food at Domino's, and I'd work 13, 14-hour days. I'd come home, probably not be able to sleep because of the neuropathy pain, things like that. I'd get back up, even if I didn't sleep, I'd go back into the store at 10 o'clock. And this is pre-COVID, so they were open till 3 a.m. And I'd often work doubles for those that didn't want to work. It also built my wall of like, what are you doing? You know, when it comes to young people and people that don't want to work, is I'd see people fake being sick to come into work, and I was faking being okay to go to work.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
So I would look at it through that perspective of just like people that sat around on their phones and they didn't want to do anything, and they always took the lazy way out. And like, as I get older, I understand it, because I'm sure at 20, 23, 24, I probably did a lot of the same thing, right? And it took me going through that to realize it, but I'm just like, you know, you have all this opportunity in front of you and you're not utilizing it. And you didn't probably do much this morning. I had to get the blood drained out of my body just to be here, to be of service to everyone around me. So it built my work ethic, or at least highlighted how deep it can go, but it also built that wall of just like, if you're not in this for yourself, I don't really want to associate. Like, that's what I try to pull out of my clients too when I'm in front of them, is more so try to get them out of their own way. Because I realized through growing through that experience how in my way I was for so long in my life. So it's a lot of that. There's a lot of inspiration. I want to inspire through my story, but I more so want people to get out of their own damn way.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's good. And I think that for many people who have had physical impediments or ailments from a young age, they look at life through a different perspective. I certainly did. I had cancer when I was 14, was chronically ill most of my adolescence. And so it gives you a different perspective where, and in your case, it was, let's not waste time with being idle. Life is a gift, and I'm going to get as much out of it as I can, despite my limitations. Whereas for so many people who are more on the phlegmatic side of things, they tend to be more steady Eddie, more high S, because they didn't have to necessarily. So they value taking things the easy route and going with the flow. You're like, I don't even know if I had a year of life in me, so I'm going to try to get as much out of it as I can. For me, it was more sucking the marrow out of life. I'm going to try to, I've done so many things in my life, so many different experiences and things I've done, that I'm like, I want that for me, I want that for my kids, I want that for everybody around me, to experience that there is more to life than this. And you can have that at your fingertips, but you won't experience it if you settle. And so I manifest that more through my high I in DISC, being a high influencer, and you do so more in your conscientious self side of things. So
very high conscientiousness. And it's funny you mentioned that as manifestations and blessings and things like that. To finish the story, I got another transplant in 2020, height of COVID, April. So funny enough, my birthday's April 11th. My first transplant was April 9th. My second transplant was April 4th of 2020. So it was height of COVID. Nobody was around to come in with me. So I did 2 weeks of, getting myself back to work and back to being able to move and getting out of the hospital. Then I was locked in through all of lockdown. So actually, correction, I wasn't locked in. I let everyone else be locked in because I wasn't going to waste my second opportunity at life. So I would walk the lake super early. I would do all of those things just because I'm like, I'm not going to let anyone else tell me what to do. And that's that. I had to go through that again, which was my biggest fear of going through again, because that was a lot of the packed in, suppressed trauma from I was a kid. Like, I don't remember anything before I was like 5, 6 years old. So I know going through that experience again, it brought it all to the surface. But what it really brought to the surface was like, I'm not, like you said, I'm not wasting time, and I'm definitely not letting anybody tell me what I can or can't do.
There you go.
Like, it's never gonna happen. I have a high sense of independence and a high sense of freedom, and I'm just like, which is weird for someone so routine and so structured, but I do it because I want to keep that independence and that freedom.
That is very common, actually, for those who are more routine and analytical. One of their primary goals is not to be constrained.
Right.
Some of that is because of life experience has taught you that people can't always be trusted, so therefore you do things your own way, on your terms, in order to make sure that the outcome is favorable. On the other side of it, it is that you recognize that being structured and analytical and conscientious allows you to build up the type of life that you're wanting to have for you. and it gives you that sense of freedom and independence. You have chosen the path less taken on purpose. Rather than work at a corporation doing 9 to 5, you're a realtor, to have personal freedom. Now, most realtors tend to be high I's, very high on the social engagement.
I'm glad we're talking about this because it was on my list to get in the differentiators of personalities, and those I deal with on a daily basis.
Right. So most realtors are social butterflies, people. And that's great for maybe sales. Maybe they'll have a little bit less sales resistance at first.
Right.
But reputation follows them long term because they oftentimes have a very low C, very, very low. And so how much paperwork and how much follow through and how many emails and phone calls and stuff is required to be compliant, to do things the right way, that how many realtors don't do effectively.
Right.
And so in the long run, you would know this more than I do, but what is the percentage of realtors that eventually leave the real estate industry?
86%.
Yeah, because they can't.
Yeah.
They can't keep up with it. They don't get enough client base, not enough referrals. Referrals are everything in your industry.
Right.
So because there are so many realtors to choose from, why would they choose you over someone else? Well, usually it's word of mouth referral. I had a great experience with this person. I refer them to. You get a referral. On the other side of it is, did you sell? Did the house sell?
Right.
And how many realtors can't actually sell?
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's a common I would say misunderstanding, and a common trope for most people in my business. And I get it. Like, I understand why this is. It's marketing. It's about marketing. But it's a common thing in my business for people to say, get the listing. Just get the listing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's overpriced. Doesn't matter of this. Doesn't matter of that. But I look at it completely differently because, my perspective on that is my job isn't to list your house. My job is to sell your house. My job, and you know this because I'm goal oriented, my job is to get you to your goal. There's a reason you'll want to sell this house, and you've attached that reason to something beyond the monetary gain and beyond everything else that you're getting immediately. It's not transactional for you because you're talking about a life movement. Mm-hmm. So I want to know what that is and what I can do to get you there. And I think a lot of agents are just super transactional. Hey, I'm just going to take the listing. Hey, I'm just going to do this, even if it's $100,000 overpriced. And I say that tongue in cheek, but people take listings all the time that are $100,000 to $200,000 to $300,000 overpriced. Mm-hmm. I see it all the time. I've talked to clients in that way, and I've said, I don't think this is for me personally, because I can't get you there if I take this listing at this price. So, and they're okay with that because they got a ton of other options that'll do that, right? But for me, it's just, again, the goal orientation, but it's like, also to be blunt, is if I have 6 listings and none of them are selling and I'm just trying to market, what the hell am I marketing? I'm marketing that I'm absolutely incompetent at my job. If those listings aren't selling, what are you marketing?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And to me, the part of both of us that wants to help people is just like, there's no way. I could never take 6 listings, overpriced listings, knowing I'm not gonna help those people, and then just be like, oh, it's okay, I got 3 other listings because I was able to market myself.
There's the value of the human dignity and component to that as well, where the integrity is really important. A high C has high integrity most often. Sorry.
For those that don't understand what you're referencing, I understand it, we understand it, but explain the DISC component.
I'm a certified behavioral consultant in DISC. So we have DISC, which stands for 4 letters: dominance, influence, steadiness, or conscientiousness. All human beings operate in all 4 of them to varying degrees, above the line, we say, or below the line. If you look at it from the spectrum of, there's these 4 personality components, and there's this line in the middle. The 2 or 3 or 1 that's above the line would be the areas that you're primarily functioning in, and the ones below the line would be the areas that you don't operate in very much. I am an ID personality type, so I'm an influencer high, and D just below it, barely. Right. And my conscientious is there, just above the line, but it's not. It's there to serve me to accomplish these things, the I and the D. I am not S at all, like plummeted. So what that means is that I am primarily motivated to influence others my personality type is called persuader. So I persuade people towards whatever the goal is. I use my dominance leadership factor to help me gain more influence, but my primary motivation is influence, not control, as what a dominant personality type would have. And I use the conscientious, analytical, step-by-step stuff to help me get the goal done.
Right.
But it is not, I'm not motivated by the integrity or the excellence of the task. I'm motivated by the influence.
Right.
So in your case, you are a
questioner, CD, so high conscientious, not low dominance, but it's there.
Yeah. So CD types tend to be the types who walk in the room and they do exactly what you said. They analyze everything. What's going on, pros and the cons, what can be trusted, what can't be trusted. They oftentimes make meticulous accounting and CPAs or very detail-oriented, detail is the key. Dominance in the sense of the control is there not because you need to be the one in charge, but it's there in the sense of being able to maintain and ensure the excellence.
Yeah.
It is excellence-oriented, goal-oriented. And so on the spectrum of DISC, the D and I types are going to be more relationship-oriented. The S and the C types are going to be more on the task-orientedness. Sorry, D and C are task-oriented, and the I and the S are relationship-oriented. The D and the I are more action or aggressive, and the S and the C tend to be more passive. The fact that you have the D with the C makes you more of the aggressive, task-oriented person.
Right. So the DISC is a huge one. I think I've asked you this before, but so I've obviously being analytical, I've done the 6 human needs. I've done the personality plus. I've done the Clifton strengths. I've done love languages. I've done all of it just to understand myself better because deeply introspective, right? So out of those, what have you done? What do you suggest people do primarily? I mean, obviously you're DISC certified, but is there any other things that if people want to know more about themselves?
I mean, do all of those. I've only done, of the ones you listed, I've done the 6 love languages, and words of affirmation would be the highest for me, and quality time would be second. I think that makes sense for an I. You know, wanting to have that praise and that word of affirmation. But the other ones that I've done are the Enneagram. So I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know if you've done Enneagram before.
I think I've seen it because it's in one of the long disc formats, but I haven't done it directly.
Okay. So the Enneagram is fascinating. I love it. I have a friend of mine who's a certified Enneagram coach, and she speaks on my mastermind about once a month. And the Enneagram focuses a lot on your core fears and core motivations. And as a 7, it's basically influence again, but it gives me more what my core fear is and my core motivation. So my core motivation is to be free to experience and to express. My core fear is to be put in a box and told, stay here. And so you're probably, I'm assuming, we'll have to do you have to do the test some way. Anyway.
You know what? I'm probably going to do it today just because you mentioned it. That's how I am.
I'll give you the link to her, and you can get a discount too.
Okay.
And then I also have done course Myers-Briggs. And so
I don't like the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, why is
and
that?
I think I've told you this. So from my understanding, because I did my favorite personality test I've ever done is Understand Myself, which is the Big 5 aspect scale. The creator of that and a lot of other creatives of some of the personality tests. The Myers-Briggs has, as far as I know, no scientific backing. So there's not a lot of in-depth clinical trials behind the Myers-Briggs. It's based on a lot, obviously, a lot of books, a lot of personality studies, but there's no complete evidence scientific backing, which that's going to stand out to me being an analytical person and being a very evidence providing person when I sit down with people. You know, like you mentioned, core fears and things like that, but like reading through my DISC personality is just like when you sit down in front of Dalton, do not make it emotional.
Yeah.
And if you have something that you want to say, you better have evidence to back it up. So that's probably a me thing, right? But that's why I've done it. It was one of the first personality tests I ever did, but learning more about it, I didn't follow it, so to speak.
Yeah. The Myers-Briggs was one of the first ones I've done, and like many, I would say that the Enneagram, you're always the same number. It never changes, okay? With disc, for the most part, it's steady, but there can be various increase up the line or below the line, or depending on stress or the situations, it can fluctuate. With the Myers-Briggs, it can change at any given moment of when you take the test. The thing that I've been consistent in was the E and the N. I'm extroverted and highly intuitive. That's always been the case. Extroverted just above the line, though. I'm borderline introvert, so it's just interesting. I'm more extroverted when I need to be. When I'm at BNI and I make my little presentation.
It's your dominance side of you pushing you into that.
Yeah, it pushes me into that. Yeah. But honestly, I like to just kind of let people come to me most often.
Yeah. It's the energy thing, because I'm the same way. Like, people always ask me, I haven't done a lot recently because now I'm running the meeting, but my 60 seconds were always very creative because I'm a naturally creative person. But it was like, it's the same thing. It's my dominance type. If I'm too sedentary, will just shove me into situations because it's like you're being too stagnant.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep 6 human needs, right? Growth is at the top, which I found very interesting because I think over 90% of people, they're two human needs that are at the top for most are significance and I don't think it's predictability, but it's in the same vein. So they want to be sure something's going to work and they want to feel significant.
Yeah.
And that's why social media, you see people all over the place
and
wanting to be significant.
I've not done that one, but I was looking at it earlier. Certainty, variety, significance, connection, growth, and contribution. And I would say that probably for me, it's probably variety, because I like change and excitement and new stimuli.
Since I obviously, another admitted, so I'm definitely clinically diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. So for me, I thought it would be predictability and things like that, but those are the lowest 2 on my list.
Interesting.
Growth is actually the highest, by and far the highest.
From what little I know.
And then second was connection, love and connection, and then contribution. So those 3 things, like Tony Robbins talks about it, but you'll have a very fulfilled life if you're very low in significance and very low in anything else, because you're not living for other people for the most part. It's very, but to that point is, I will push myself into growth all the time, and just because I think I have a deep fear of being comfortable.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I mean, part of it is that you don't know how to be comfortable because you never were.
Yeah, and that's exactly. It was the unpredictability of what I went through as a kid. I could be a kid for 1-2 days, and then, hey, don't do that, don't live this way, going to the hospital, going to the doctors. It was, so that in my mind, like the OCD obviously took over, is like, you need to discover patterns and be routine, because that's the only way you can control the predictability of your life, which you can't. That's how mental illness traps us in so many ways, whether it's anxiety, OCD, ADHD, whatever it is. But that's how I learned to navigate the world, because everything was so unpredictable for me all the time.
I think it's interesting that although you and I are different personality types, the one thing that I think we converge on is our desire for excellence and to be the top at whatever we do. Which goes to showing BNI, first month me joining, we're the 2 in the top 100.
And I've been consistently in there for for the beginning, the first year, I was so super involved, and I was like, oh, now that I've been in the top 100 club for 9 months, I got to continue that, right? I got to make it a year. I got to make it this. So that's gone a long way. I only had a couple more questions, so obviously I knew we would get lost in conversation here, but we talked a little bit about obviously the inner workings of this, which I love conversing about that. But in your experience, what are the businesses that need brand awareness the most? Like, what do you find that need coaching the most? Because we mentioned it earlier, is there's a lot of realtors out there, businesses like that, where there's a lot of people and people kind of already look at you in a box, and then the most professional people present themselves that way of like, this is what I am, this is my only identity. So in your experience, what are some businesses and entrepreneurships that probably need personal branding the most?
So, and then just as a kind of a clarification for those listening and watching, personal branding is marketing yourself. So we're not talking about a business per se, like a corporation or an LLC.
And this is important to differentiate.
Yeah, because, and so I have a background in marketing for businesses as well. And I owned an agency that we did marketing in over 30 states, 4 continents, and I've worked with almost every industry you can imagine.
Sure.
And the components of branding are true in any situation. Now I'll just say this though. When it comes to personal branding, usually it's the most effective for people who are the brand. So this would be, I think everybody can benefit from it, but if you're an electrician and there's a high demand for electricians, no one cares about your personality as much.
Sure.
They care about the quality of the service, and ultimately it's about your SEO and being found on Google and then having a credible website, and that's more going to be basic, because a lot of those service industries are going to get business no matter what.
For their service, not them.
Not them.
Yeah.
So realtors, high need for personal brand coaching. Insurance agents, high need for personal brand coaching. Anybody who's looking to be a coach or a wellness practitioner, anyone who's looking to be a keynote speaker or an author, a podcaster, anyone who's going to be an entertainer and be on stage, any type, whether that's comedian, music, you name it. Models, actors, politicians.
Those people are naturally expressive because they're naturally artistic. At least the performance.
They are, but
types.
You got to keep in mind too that personal branding is not only the ability to express; it's the ability to express appropriately for the right things. And so, a lot of people have charisma. Are they able to be charisma the right way?
Right.
And so, politicians, a prime example of this. Just because you're charismatic doesn't mean you won people over. What is the language you need to adopt while being authentic? How do you resonate with people or not? And so there's lots of nuances when it comes to that. So I would say that the things I work at with personal branding is number one, discovering who people are, overcoming the obstacles that get in the way of the authenticity. But then we get into the nitty-gritties of like, how do we express that through the written components of all the stuff they have out, their articles and website and landing page and social media captions and their hashtags and their titles and their elevator pitch and anything that's going to be the vocabulary behind the brand. We also look at the way they dress, how do you present yourself publicly, your public image, according to your personality type, but also according to your body type, so that your clothing tells a story, is memorable. It's also going to be through confidence on camera, confidence in articulation and locution. Public speaking is a huge component of it, as well as understanding good photography angles, when you take photos, the best postures and image and angles. And then it's going to be interview style. A lot of people struggle with interviews. A lot of people struggle with having conversations one-on-one. So what do you lead with? What are you going to say in a networking event that makes people want to talk to you afterwards? So it's not because I'll go to many networking events and I'm like, 95% of the people who just spoke, I have no memory of what they just said.
Yeah, and
literally just don't remember.
That's pattern break. You know, right? That's why I am the way I am with the BNI room. It's like you need a pattern break.
Yeah.
Like 5-6 people in, by the time they're just talking about their business, unless they say something quippy or something like that, you need some type of pattern break because you have to stand out.
Yeah.
You know, I think. One of my favorite ones was just standing up and being silent for 60 seconds.
Yes,
because
I think I was there for that one.
So it was, you know, Wanda had nudged me and she's like, too many people are on their phones, I'm going to say something. I'm like, don't. Just let it come to me and you'll see that all of them will drop their phones. Because you're supposed to be hearing something.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, like, you know, like, that's a cue. Like, all right, who's up? Oh, let me, like, act like I'm paying attention before I go back to what I'm actually paying attention to.
Yes.
So for me, it's the pattern break. Maybe it's the controlling part of myself, but like in that moment, I realized I loved it because I had everyone right there in the palm of my hand. And I was like, all right, I like this.
Yeah. You know? It's also going to be public relations, media placements, podcast placements, getting on articles, increasing your SEO so that when they look up your name on Google, you are featured in so many things that it gives you a heightened credibility where they go, okay. And so you just never know. Ultimately, I'm trying to create, what I try to do with personal branding is create the infrastructure or what I like to call the symbiotic ecosystem, where all the components of social media and podcasts and articles and your website and your branding and the way you dress and the photos you're in and the videos you're in all of it is a cohesive message that says this person can be trusted and you need to get some time with this person.
Right.
And so what it does is it reduces sales resistance. Number one, it creates opportunities, because the more things you're featured in, the more things that you are publicly involved in, the more people you're going to meet. Secondly, it's also going to build that sense of consistency of the more people see you, the more that you're top of mind, the more that they're going to be like, this person is who I want to work with. We do have this kind of like component in personal branding where when it's done effectively, there's essentially a carrot being dangled in front of the rabbit, and people want it. They want you. They want to engage with you. There's a sense of like, I'm getting the best quality, the best thing.
Right.
And so that takes time to build out effectively, but when it's done, it breaks down so many barriers. So for example, I brought this up last week and this week in BNI. Basically, I had as a prime example, one of my more recent clients who signed up lives in California. I didn't know him. He knows nobody I know. He listened to one of my podcasts that I was on. He liked what he heard, looked me up, saw my website, saw it made sense to him, followed me on Instagram, followed me on LinkedIn, sent me an email. I responded within like 5 minutes, because that's how I operate usually with emails.
Yeah, you're really good at like, once you start following you pop up all over the
all
place.
The time.
So he's not just like, he's not preaching something he doesn't practice, trust me.
So then he's like, okay, by the time he had the initial consult with me, I had already broken down a lot of that sales resistance. And he asked me something along the lines of, why should I hire you? And I said, well, you're here, aren't you?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. And again, I'm not trying to be cocky at all, but basically what I'm trying to do is make it so easy for people to be funneled into the outcome. And traditional marketing for small businesses doesn't work. You could spend thousands of dollars pushing out ads for real estate and in your industry. You may or may not get clicks on it. Are they going to call you? Probably not, honestly, because there's Zillow and there's all these other things, and they probably have a cousin who's a realtor and someone knows them. What's going to make them gravitate towards you?
Right.
And a lot of that is people don't even realize it, and I'm a huge studier of consumer psychology and trying to understand why people make the choices that they make. And if we understand that, really at the end of the day, people will buy anything. This is why people will spend thousands of dollars buying a scarf at Hermes when they could buy something very similar at a small Macy's or something that's a lot less expensive. But there's a brand behind it. There's a label. There's a packaging to it that is appealing, and there's a prestige about it that people are suddenly willing to spend money on it because they perceive the value as being this, even though really it's not.
Right. I think what plays into that a little bit is, at least the human needs aspect, is for most people that thrive on significance, is pretty much everyone, Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, but everyone will make a decision based on significance. It's like, I want to feel significance, whether it's I'm driving a Lamborghini or I'm driving an economy car to save on gas, it's still, there's significance attached to it. Like, you just saying, oh, I don't want a Lamborghini, is you putting it out there that you want to feel significant for your values. So I think that's, for most people, there's a common attachment to significance there. There's just a couple more before we finish up here. So you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I want you to touch on it, because it's almost trendy at this point, and I don't like it. But so talk about a little bit about your perception on imposter syndrome, because you and I have both talked about this, and we both don't necessarily believe in imposter syndrome.
So I use the term imposter syndrome because it is trendy, but I don't believe in imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, by definition, is essentially that you have a syndrome, a paranoia, essentially, a medical or psychological condition or a syndrome of feeling like you are an imposter in the room. Innately, at the core level, that would mean that you yourself feel like you are inadequate or not supposed to be in the room. Now, being an imposter by its nature means that you're faking it, you're lying, or you're hiding something. So I don't like the word imposter. I would say that the better term to use beyond the imposter syndrome would maybe be an inferiority complex. Because truly, if there's different scenarios. So, prime example, when I first got into marketing, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing very well. Okay, right. Although I had an interest in it, and although I was good at it, I went into a marketing convention, and there were all these established multi-million-dollar marketing professionals in the room. And I stuttered my way through some of it because I felt that these people knew more than I did. And you know what? They did. They did. What changed that, though, was that I suddenly realized that I don't need to be like these other agencies. They have 10 years, they're 10 years ahead of me. Right. They're well established. I'm a small business. That didn't really matter. It was that I had something to offer that they couldn't do. What was my differentiator? What was my provide? So I talked about describe your vibe, describe your tribe. Describe your provide is a really important thing in this. It is essentially to understand that what do I bring to the table that no one else has? And again, like we said, lots of realtors, lots of marketing individuals. Yeah. What I brought to the table for my clients consistently was in the realm of marketing was that they felt heard, they felt understood, and they felt trust that I could express who they were effectively. And that came from the standpoint of me understanding people. So rather than me presenting myself as an individual who is an expert in marketing, I'm presenting myself as the expert of understanding people or getting to understand people well enough to express things for them in the realm of marketing. So I would do things very in-depth to understand. My discovery meetings are very in-depth, even in the marketing agency world. They're like, why are you asking me about how I got married and where I went to school?
People tell me I get too involved.
Yeah, and why I was homeschooled compared to when, and who my parents were, and my life story and traumas I went through when they're an electrician company. I'm like, because I'm trying to find the secret sauce. I'm trying to find the thing that makes you unique. And then we're going to translate that into your branding kit, into your website design, into your social media and your Google ads. And this was in the realm of marketing. So much more so in the realm of personal branding then. It is about, if I can understand you and help you to understand you, then we can help others understand you as well. Right, yeah. And at the end of the day, it is about building understanding. Marketing is about building understanding, not just awareness. And I think that's the difference with most marketing agencies, is they're building awareness about a brand that it exists, but people don't understand why they need it.
This probably is never going to be simple between us because we love the complexities of these things. So let's go with, I was curious about this one because I understand artistry, which is expression. So your logo, did you design your logo?
My graphic designer who's in my team did, yes.
Did you have input on what
100%.
Okay, so explain your logo, why it is your logo, and what the representation is.
So my logo is a harpy eagle, which is the national bird of Panama. It's a huge eagle, very majestic, also endangered. And growing up, that eagle was very symbolic of, eagles are in general. But when I look at the realm of what I do and what I feel there's significance in what I help people do is I help people discover that they have wings. Many people don't know that they do. Other people have allowed their wings to be clipped. Other people are only flying at a certain altitude. And ultimately, I'm trying to get people to soar way up and have that skybound mastery to really be flying and seeing things from that whole objective perspective. So many people are subjective to their environment rather than looking at things from the objective standpoint. So I use that symbol of the eagle as a way of kind of presenting and expressing soaring on eagle's wings. When people can do that, then their personal brand will excel. They're above criticism. They're above caring if people like them or not. They are at a place where they're super comfortable, but they're flying at a different dimension. They're not playing in the sandbox. They are ready to take over the world. And so that is ultimately what that symbol means with my logo.
I really enjoy it. I really like it because I knew there was something in there because you're not the type of person that would just be, hey, do whatever.
No. I was very, very, and also it has some indigenous patterns in it from the Imbara.
Do you have trouble with, because of how in-depth you are with what you do, because I run into this a lot as well, do you have trouble with kind of, since you're at such a high altitude, speaking to people that are on lower frequencies? Do you find that sometimes you're speaking at a resonance or a frequency that they just can't hear?
So I do know that I'm told that I'm intellectual and articulate and use big vocabulary and all the things like that. I think what that does, that is authentically who I am. I'm a big-time reader, a
that
writer.
was going to be our next question.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And also, although I will admit to myself that the last couple of years I haven't read near as much because I've been so crazy busy. But growing up, I read all the time. And so, but I'm also listening to podcasts all the time, and I'm listening to
anything educational.
Anything educational. So one thing is that is innately who I am. I'm also bilingual, so I speak Spanish and English fluently, interchangeably. And when you speak two languages, your vocabulary can definitely increase and grow. I was also a professional interpreter on stage, can do professional interpretation, consecutive and simultaneous. So it allows you to glean from these really high-profile keynote speakers, speaking as they're speaking, and you get more confidence and articulation. But I think for me too is, I look at it from the standpoint of, if I'm authentically speaking the way that I speak, can I contextualize things for people to understand better? Absolutely, and I do it all the time. But if I'm on a podcast like I am with you right now, I'm not gonna hold back. I'm gonna speak how I speak, because ultimately it's the authenticity piece, but secondly, it inspires people to want to do the same. I think everybody, for the most part.
Well, imagine that he's trying to inspire you guys.
And I have, if you go to my social media, you'll see I actually have some reels where I talk about this, and there is an intentional component. This morning, I was watching a podcast on my way here to St. Cloud in horrible traffic for an hour and a half. And
sounds about right.
Right? And there was about 10 words that were spoken this morning through one of the podcasts that I had not heard often, that this professor was speaking. And I was like, I like those 10 words. And I made mental notes to try to use them in my vocabulary. Not to try to show off, but because etymology, the origin of words, the study of words, words have meaning.
I'm huge on that,
They have depth. And when you understand that words have power, words have influence, words can make changes, then how many people nowadays limit their vocabulary to only a certain set of words? They express,
and they're abbreviated.
Or they're swear words when they're angry, or whatever it is. And there are so many ways to say the same thing that have nuances and layers, and it's highly effective in diplomatic affairs, highly effective in public relations, highly effective in communication in general, when your vocabulary has layers to it.
I agree. And some people, I find it, especially with the blue collar types and things like that, I think it can be a little bit intimidating as well, because I'm very much the same way. And I've even had people ask me, like, do you use big words just to make yourself feel smart? And it's like, no, the word I just used actually encapsulates the whole premise of what we're talking about, instead of essentially just this small aspect. It's like, if you looked at the word, you would understand that this is exactly what we're talking about. And to your point, and I pointed this out in BNI when it comes to accountability, when I've done my core value, is accountability leans on your word. Like, accountability, you have to be accountable to your word. And I trace it all the way back to spiritual and biblically, is the first thing God did when he spoke into existence is he spoke it into existence.
100%.
Is you have to speak what you're going to do into existence and follow through on it. And that's the importance of words. I think words are probably, they are the most important thing. Even though you communicate through body language more than words, your intentionality comes through with your words. And you have to understand that and be, like you said, you have to be very careful with that when you do understand that, is that your words have power.
So key what you just said, like majorly. And I agree with that 100%. God spoke things into reality, and they were as a result. And that is very similar. When the first thing that he commanded or gave to Adam was to name the animals, And so it was, again, a word being associated with the personality type of the animal. And so words have power to not only build up but also destroy, to add identity or to take away. The first thing that happens to us when we are born is there's boy or girl, or name is given, right? So there's an identity component with the spoken component of it. And so a lot of personal branding is putting the language, the words, and to the it's to the business, to the entity. I've helped a lot of businesses get formed over the years in my consulting and marketing work. And what's amazing is sometimes these people don't even have a business name yet. They have the idea, and so based on their personality type, we come up with the business name. And it almost always feels like when that business has a name, now it has the identity. It has a personality. And within that comes so much other expression. Something has been created that people can now taste and feel and see tangibly. When it comes to big words, though, I think for people who are lifelong studiers and lifelong people who are looking to grow and always learn, it's almost like if you had the best Swiss chocolate in the Swiss Alps on location, and you're having you're tasting it in that environment, and you've experienced it. To go back to eating Hershey's chocolate is a little hard. Yeah. So you can go there and do that, and it's not looking down on it. There's certainly a time and place where I've enjoyed Hershey's, and I'm not, but at the same time, I know that there are other ways of tasting chocolate that are going to be more effective, as you were saying. And so I look at it as more of a way to preserve culture, as a way to express more effectively, and as a way to cause people to think more deeply about the things that were being said.
Yeah, I think, questions, statements, just being super intentional of what you ask. And for the most part, I believe less is more, for sure. Like you and I can talk all day, but when I'm in front of a client, I'm always trying to get my message across in as little words as possible and break it down as simple as possible. Because again, going to that frequency thing, I can talk way up here, but if they're not grasping it, I have to bring it down.
Yeah.
But I think you have another meeting here very shortly.
I think I do, yeah.
So I'm going to cut you loose. You're a busy guy, and I don't want you to be late. So I thank you very much for coming in. And I know we're going to do this again, because these are the podcasts I enjoy for sure, because I can just talk with you for hours. Yes. We understand things at a base level and then a higher level, because we have to. We have to walk our clients through these transitions, and that's what I look at it as, is like, I'm a growing person, you're a growing person. We want our clients to be growing people as well, and that's the heart of what we connect on.
Absolutely.
Thank you much for coming on board.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
That was
great.
It's David. I'm Dalton Albritton, as always, inviting you to find your way to live in St. Cloud.